We are back after a weekend of sports, episode 53 of The Next Best Bet. I'm Jake Higgins with Brett Levy. As always, we typically talk about the best upcoming sports betting lines, episodes every Monday and Thursday, and we had a jam-packed weekend with some golf and UFC. There was going to be a race at Talladega, Brett, but it looks like that's being pushed to Monday.
Yeah, tons of sports this weekend, tons of sports news, a lot to get to on this Sunday night here.
So let's do our brief hindsight with Higgins before we jump into Beginners Boulevard. So as you know from episode 52, I gave out 3 golf picks. I thought Justin Thomas and Colin Morikawa were both going to finish in the top 5, or either was going to finish in the top 5. And then I also had a prop bet of no hole-in-one being hit during this RBG Heritage event. And you know what? I was right. So if you find plus money on a no hole-in-one happening, you might as well take it. Because that was the only bet that I had win from that golf, and it helped save me a little bit.
There you go, winner, winner, chicken dinner.
And then I did not give out UFC picks. I did give out a lean of liking Curtis Blades against Volkov, the main card fight. I didn't like the odds that there were, so I didn't give out a pick at the time, but Blades showed exactly why he was such a heavy favorite. He just dominated that entire fight, really, to be honest.
Yeah, he looked dominant, so that was a good call there.
And then lastly, we also did have the Belmont Stakes, which if you follow us on social media, you saw I posted a few picks. I actually posted my first horse betting picks ever, and unfortunately they did not win. I should have listened to Brett. He was texting with me. He told me to take Tis the Law. I did not. Tis the Law won, and I came out a loser.
Well, what I was trying to tell you was to exact it. So take the other horses you like and turn that Tis the Law into some plus money. And you just pick the other horses.
Well, I picked other horses to show, and the one horse that I picked to win actually finished in second. So if I had done an exacta, that would have actually won me a pretty good amount of money, I think.
That would have been nice.
Let's get into our Beginners Boulevard, though. Like we talked about last week, we're going over all these terms again. This week, we are taking a ride down Beginners Boulevard with the word hedge. You may hear this. It's when a sports bettor places another bet to hedge their losses and make sure that they come out a winner regardless of the outcome of the sporting event. This is often done with spreads, money line, over under. Typically, your generic daily game bet styles, you are able to do that. And it can often be done by taking one bet before the game starts and then jumping on a live bet once the game's going to kind of cover both ends.
Yeah, it can also be done with a future bet, like where you say I have, I don't know, the Patriots to win 9 games, right? And then it's the last game of the season, and the Patriots have 8 wins, so you take the other team, and hopefully you bet it so that there's some room for you to make plus money either way.
Absolutely, that's a great point. You can do it with futures as well. Hedging is a good strategy to use if you think something good's going to happen and then maybe there's an injury in a game or something happens in a game that you notice that you think is going to significantly change the outcome. You can hop on the other side to kind of stop yourself from losing too much or at least limit your losses.
Yeah, a live hedge.
That's the way I typically will hedge. But let's get into our baseball, Brett, because there is more drama between the MLB and the MLB Players Association. It does not look like it's getting better.
Well, I think drama is a fair way of putting it because it certainly isn't news. Like, what's the news? They didn't negotiate?
Well, so the MLB came out with that 60 game, fully prorated proposal that we talked about on the last episode. The players, they tried countering with a 70 game proposal. However, that did not really fly with MLB, and they said they weren't going to counter that either. It was either vote on the 60 game proposal or nothing. So the players are apparently looking to vote on that, but that vote was supposed to be today on Sunday, and it got delayed.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm know you're aware, but I'm sure our listeners are aware. Tampa had a really bad weekend for COVID. It wasn't the only spot to have a bad weekend for COVID, Orlando as well. But two spring training facilities in greater Tampa were shut down. The NHL facility was shut down. The Bucks had people get tested. So it was a mess specifically there. And
Florida has had a terrible week overall with their rising coronavirus numbers.
right. And there's a team in Tampa Bay that obviously will play there. And there's also a team in Miami. So you got to be worried when two teams are going to be affected by this. And yeah, I think it was smart for the players to delay. There's a team in Arizona. Arizona's spiking. So why not delay the vote a little bit?
And Tony Clark, in a memo that was sent to Rob Manfred, basically said because of the MLB training camps having to be shut down, because after the Phillies shut theirs down in Clearwater and these other things happened in the Tampa, Florida area, the MLB temporarily closed all of the training camps for all of the teams for necessary cleaning and what have you. And because they're closed, it's going to take even longer to get them open back up if the players come to an agreement. So Tony Clark said the earliest they could get there is June 29th, which leaves 66 days to play 60 games, which for the MLB is doable. They play a lot of games basically every single day throughout much of the summer, but the window is closing, Brett. The window is closing.
It's you and I have not been very high on the return of baseball. I think what's going to end up happening here is, Manfred's going to invoke his whatever clause, and that's what we're going to get, and it'll be whatever. But that's what I feel. I'm right now. It seems like all the news out of Major League Baseball, as funny as this sounds, is like, hey, they offered this, but we won't really budge. And then the other people respond, hey, they offered us their thing, but we like what we sent them last time. So we're just going to send it again. like,
It's a lot of posturing. It's a lot about money. It is. It's a very ugly situation in a scenario that's supposed to be about the health and safety of this season happening and the players and coaching staffs involved.
yeah,
And
well,
instead, it
not
has been turned into money.
I mean, not to cut you off, sorry, but it's also about the 2022 labor negotiations.
It
And like,
absolutely is.
it's that's 2 years away, and that's a huge factor in why these sides are being so stern.
It's a lot of why the posturing is going on the way it is because it's setting up for a hard negotiation next year. And I believe that that negotiation is going to be just as rough as this one is, unless some of these strings can get tied together on their own.
Yeah, it's going to be in 2 years, but exactly, it's after the 2021 season. So,
It'll be at the
um,
winter meetings of the 2020 after the
right,
2021
right.
season. So
So,
it'll be December 2021 into 22. That's what I meant by next year.
got you. Yep. So, uh, no, I mean, that's what it's about. That's what it's about. Like, if those negotiations were, I don't know, 12 years down the road, like maybe this would look a little different. But I think what's gonna happen is they're gonna the players don't want to agree to this no grievance clause, and that's what baseball keeps trying to sneak in there. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to they're going to play, and then they'll probably take them to court over a grievance.
And when I was on my way to go place my Belmont Stakes bets yesterday, I was listening to CBS Radio, Brett, and the sports talk guy, Andrew Filipponi, that was on, he was making a really good point about what's going on in baseball right now. Uh, because, like we said, a lot of this is about the money, and the owners don't want to lose a lot of money from the broadcast rights or deals by paying the players fully prorated salaries. Now, where does this money come from? It comes from the broadcast contracts, but it also comes from the fans. It comes from merchandise, ticket sales, parking, all of these deals that the fans pay a heavy hand into the revenue of the league. And these negotiations are really pissing off the fans. It's basically the MLB and the players are shitting on the fans. They're shitting on their brand. And if you're an MLB fan, whenever baseball comes back, are you going to be inclined to watch at least this season? Not necessarily next season, but like if there's a shortened season, are you going to be inclined this season to watch after all of the trouble and the headaches that the MLB has put you throughout this entire coronavirus? I don't know. There's been a lot of fans that are saying that they don't want to watch and that the MLB has lost them as a fan. I don't know how interested I'll be to watch, but I'll probably still tune in because I'm a sports addict. But I don't know how much I'll actually pay attention to what's going on or care.
My caring will be down, but like I'm still gonna bet on it. To be honest with you, like I'll tell you what, me and another one of our friends, we love taking Yankees overs. And there's nothing's changed with the Yankees lineup in a shortened season that makes me think they're still not going to hit 100. I mean, obviously I need to strengthen the numbers, but you know, Aaron Judge could hit 15 home runs in 60 games, 20 home runs. So like, you know, I still think they're going to put up runs. It just won't be as many for their season. But in an individual game, they could still score 10 runs. So I'm still going to have interest in betting it. You know, there will be fun props, I'm sure, each day because the sports books have gotten very creative over this time. So I'm sure there will be reasons for me to watch baseball, but to go back to your initial point, it's just yes, this has been an ugly negotiation.
And to the point that you were making about the sports betting, I will be very interested to see if the fans and the sports bettors that took these futures like what you and I took with the MLB of we each took a team's over for total wins in the season. I had the Braves at 90 and a half. There's no way the MLB is going to even play 90 games this season. So, right now I can't even buy that bet back. It's locked. Are they just waiting for the MLB to announce what their season's going to be and then refund? Or am I going to lose that bet because there's not even going to be enough games played for the Braves to get that amount? Because that's
You
another
should
way.
file a grievance. Fuck the
I
players.
would
You
fire
should
I would
file a
file a
grievance.
grievance about that. Yeah, because
That
that is
that's
another way to
crazy.
piss off the fans.
Yeah, that is ridiculous. Like, I mean, obviously the sports book is going to have to refund you that bet if they agree to a 60-game season. I did not place any of my bets because we did that in early March and I was like, great. I know who I'm going to pick. I have them down on the spreadsheet, but um I don't need to place these right this second. And then baseball didn't happen. So now FanDuel doesn't have all my money and I have been able to lose it on other things.
Very nice. Well, we will see if the players in the MLB can get together and come up with a season. We'll see what interest there even is for that. I mean, there was $1 billion contract that the television station of Turner gave to the MLB just last week. So there's obviously some sort of a market there because of the ratings of how we've seen how golf's raising their ratings. We've seen how and every sport has basically had higher television ratings. So you would imagine if the MLB can come back, they might have some elevated ratings, elevated ratings. But we will see. It's the only time will tell about that. But let's move on to basketball, Brett, because after such a long, extensive 113-page health and safety manual came out last episode, we don't really have a lot of NBA news going on right now.
No, not really. We heard the early entry deadline is going to be on August 17th. That's probably a bigger deal for the colleges than the NBA, to be honest with you. And then the draft is going to be on October 16th. So those are some dates to circle on your calendar. But they're a little bit off in the distance. The early entrant thing is interesting because a lot of colleges start up end of August, and a lot of college athletes return to campus a little bit before for um I'll call it like preseason training, even though it's not officially called that. But you get on campus as a team, and your team captains lead you through workouts or whatever, and you guys start your season training. So obviously, with the deadline being in mid August, it's gonna lead to some interesting dynamics, whether college athletes will be as prepared for the upcoming season, what everyone's workout regime in the off season looks like and all of that, especially with, I mean, state by state, there's different rules, private universities versus state universities. I mean, there are so many variables in college athletics, and this is just another one.
Well, college athletics in themselves are up in the air right now on whether or not there's going to be college football, basketball, baseball, what have you. Uh, so it'll be interesting to see where that leaves these athletes for college basketball season because, I mean, we've talked in previous episodes about the health and safety concerns that there should be for some of the coaches just because of the age of some of these coaching staffs at some of these schools. The players with the timing of this right now of when they have to enter the NBA draft, but the draft is until October, so if they don't get drafted where they want, are they still able to come back like what was recently decided in recent years?
No, they'll probably have to go to the G League. But like, yeah, it's always been it's always they've pushed it now so that agents can now help these kids through the process, and they can be a little bit even more informed on their decision making process. But um, I don't. Yeah, it shouldn't affect that too much. But going back to your coaches thing, because I do think it's important, especially when it affects my Syracuse Orange. Jim Boeheim is a very old cancer survivor who has a top three recruiting class in the country coming in 2 years, or in a year, I guess. Not this season, next season. And I really hope he's still the coach so he can bring in that class and win some basketball games.
Yeah, it is a very big concern for quite a number of programs in college basketball in terms of what coronavirus is going to mean. Is it going to force some coaches to end their career potentially? And then in the NBA, the international layout of players and whether they will end up coming over to the NBA anytime soon. The way America's handling this, it might encourage some of those players to stay overseas where they are at least in the meantime. I mean, Brett, before the show, you brought up Danny Avdija to me, the top international prospect, arguably, for next year's draft.
Yeah, he's a big time prospect. I think if you were to look at a mock draft right now, you'd probably see him around 10. And I think it's interesting he's choosing to play. There's obviously some risk, injury risk, health risk, in terms of COVID, but there's some upside too. Like hypothetically, if you're going number 10 right now and you play really well, maybe you bump up to number 5 and earn a few extra $1 million as a rookie and throughout your first contract. So you there's upside, there's some risk, but it was definitely interesting to me.
Now, this is something that I literally just thought of, and we mentioned how the NBA draft lottery is going to be taking place on August 25th. But with the expanded playoffs, does that make for a smaller lottery pickings?
So it's not an expanded playoffs. The extra teams are going to fight for the eighth seeds.
Okay. Oh, yes, you're right. So it's still going to be the full standard lottery then. Okay, gotcha. But if they can't play in Orlando on July 30th like they're hoping to, who knows if that will all be decided by August 25th.
Uh, I mean, Orlando has a bevy. Florida has just a bevy of issues right now, and like, I hope they get it figured out because it's concerning, and they're not the only ones on the rise. So like, we shouldn't just single them out, but like all these states that may have opened too early or not, closed up shop, like say California or New York City, like it's definitely showing right now. And it's definitely a concern for both the citizens and the sports teams in those cities.
Yes, and Texas as well. We saw results of the Cowboys and Texans testing positive for coronavirus.
I mean, Denver, Colorado, we saw a player test positive. We saw it in LA too. So, I mean, it's all over the country, Higgins.
Pretty much every state that has reopened has seen increases in coronavirus cases. Florida keeps getting brought up partly because I believe the number was 7 of the past 10 days hit a record high in terms of case numbers.
And also from a sports perspective, when all four of the major sports teams in your city get corona on the same day, like you're gonna get singled out, Tampa Bay. But
Yeah, I
like
agree.
we could look at college athletics really quickly too and just knock it out. But like Kansas State stopped their workouts for 2 weeks. Clemson had 28 student athletes, 23 on the football team. LSU has said a large number of its football team is members of its football team are quarantined. Like it is all over the place. And like we said it earlier with baseball, but it's going to affect sports.
We've also talked about the Buckeye Pledge, where the Ohio State football players all signed this pledge of staying limited contact with people and taking regular coronavirus tests. And then we saw Southern Methodist University, SMU. They came back for their voluntary workouts that they were doing, and then a few players tested positive for coronavirus, and then a mandatory coronavirus testing process was put into place, as well as there being a liability waiver that these players had to sign, that basically if you catch coronavirus, it's not the school's fault. It very well could be the school's fault, though, if they caught coronavirus. So these waivers, I'm not a big fan of. The Buckeye Pledge doesn't waive liability from the Ohio State, but SMU's I was not a fan of personally.
Yeah, well, and then this one was, I mean, it's a good point by the players, but I kind of chuckled a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. Chip Kelly's players at UCLA, they want a third party doctor in there for all their practices because they don't think Chip Kelly has the best interest of them at heart. And it just for me, why are you committing to a coach that doesn't care about you? Like that seems a little odd, but outside of
Yeah,
that, I side with the players. I'm a little concerned that you chose UCLA or other schools if you don't think the coach gives a shit about you, but that's a different issue.
that could have been realized after they got to campus. I mean, the recruiting could have looked all rosy and golden and everything, but once they got there for a year, saw how everything was handled internally, maybe that's when they came up with that thought process. I'm not sure. I'm not at UCLA to
No,
be able
I
to.
agree. I mean that's a fair point. I don't know. I was maybe defending the coach a little bit. I don't know what I was doing, but it made me laugh a little bit.
Yeah,
You're a good football player if you're going to UCLA. You have other options.
but while all of these athletes across all sports are figuring out whether they are going to be playing or not and trying to prepare for a potential season, we're going to shift to the NHL now. There is one NHL player that is doing something a little different with his offseason time right now, Brett. Nico Hischier with the New Jersey Devils. They missed the expanded playoffs, so he is going back to his home country of Switzerland and is going to fulfill his mandatory 18-week military obligation.
Hmm. That is interesting. Good
It's a
for him.
it's a unique way to spend his coronavirus time right now. Now, all Swiss citizens need to fulfill a military requirement. I believe I read he's going to do an 18-week mandatory training, and then there's a certain amount of years moving forward that he has to serve at least 3 weeks for his country, so, which he would typically do during the off season.
Right. No, that's interesting. And Israel has something very similar where all its citizens have to serve. So it's certainly not the only country like that. And that's good for him that he found some time where he's able to fulfill his obligations. And I'm sure he's happy. I'm sure it's not his favorite thing that he's ever had to do, but I'm sure he's happy to pay the duty for his country.
And he has not come back to the practice facilities, obviously, then, because New Jersey is out of the expanded playoffs, like I mentioned. But 200 NHL players have made it back for these voluntary workouts that have been going on at the home facilities. And 11 of the 20 players have tested positive for coronavirus. So, as we've been saying throughout all of this, each of these sports are having their own concerns here.
Yeah, all of them are having COVID concerns for sure. And going to the NFL, forget about COVID concerns. They've got guys getting sucker punched at bars.
Well, I feel like the only way you can probably hit an NFL player is if you sucker punch him, because that would be a pretty intimidating thing to do otherwise. Yes, Dallas Goddard sucker punched at a bar in South Dakota. And Brett, there were a few questions that arose when we first saw this story. My first one was, why would you go to South Dakota? I understand he's from there, but you escaped. You left it. You don't need to go back.
It sounds like someone that has a vendetta against South Dakota.
Okay, I have been to South Dakota. I don't have a vendetta against them. There's just not a lot to do.
All right, fair enough. Your Nebraska pride, baby, it's showing. But my question would be, and we've talked about it now in every fucking subject we've done, every league we've done, but why are you at a bar with all the COVID cases going on? Like, just stay home. Like,
Yeah.
just stay home. Can, can't you get alcohol delivered to your home, or can't you go to a liquor store and do the exact same thing? Like, just stay home.
And lastly, who punches an NFL football player in their own hometown?
Maybe the rival high school. I don't know. Well, so I was gonna ask you: was it someone who owned him this past year in fantasy football? Or was it someone that lost a big bet on an Eagles game?
I would go a big bet.
Big bet. I don't know. I go fantasy person because like fantasy people are crazy online. I don't know. I just feel like they're crazy.
Yes, but Dallas Goddard's not one of the names that you expect to be a win or loss defining person on your fantasy team.
That's how you're placing your Eagles bets on Dallas Goddard.
Well, maybe he dropped a game-winning pass or something. I'm not entirely sure, but
Maybe.
it is a very weird scenario of an NFL player going back to his hometown and getting sucker punched at a bar when you probably shouldn't even be back at a bar right now during this coronavirus scare. But there's some other news in the NFL that's going on right now. I mean, like we've mentioned, a number of NFL players have tested positive for coronavirus. We saw Ezekiel Elliott, we saw numerous Dallas and Houston players, as well as Tampa. It's going around the league now.
Yeah, it is. But at least Dak Prescott got paid. So at least if you're going to be in a state where COVID's rising, I might as well sign $34 million check to stay here.
Well, he signed the franchise tender, so he didn't. Him and Dallas did not come to an agreement on a contract.
No, no, they did not. But he's going to show up. I think it ends the holdout.
It should end the holdout. He should show up. I don't know if it means that he will stay in Dallas, though. Those franchise tags can be iffy like that sometimes. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how the relationship of Dak and Dallas uh, continues throughout this entire season and
Well,
whether
can
or
I be
not he'll
honest with
stay.
you?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter how their relationship is because you gave him Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott. Like, my man's going to put up I mean, best case scenario, right? Like, let's not go worst case scenario where he gets injured and doesn't play well. Let's go like medium to best case scenario. He's gonna put up 4,500 yards, 4,000 yards, like, and probably a few touchdown passes. Like, yeah, sure, Zeke and Pollard, they're gonna get their touchdowns as well, but he's got all these weapons on the outside. I don't know, like Blake Jarwin doesn't really do it for me, but he's a decent tight end, so maybe you get a few decent receptions over the middle as well. But you got three big time weapons on the outside. You got one of the top five running backs. I mean, I think you've got to like his chances of cashing in just by showing up to play on Sundays.
And worst case scenario, if Dak Prescott cannot succeed with that offensive tools, then you have Andy Dalton.
And you have Andy Dalton.
So the NFL, they have had some interesting things. There still remains quite a bit of hope that there's going to be a season, and potentially even fans, even though there have been some concerns raised by people like Dr. Fauci about the possibility of a second wave coming in the fall or what have you. But the Patriots kind of taking a precautionary step for their season ticket holders, saying those with elevated risk of catching coronavirus that are season ticket holders can waive their tickets for this season and still hold their place for next season.
I like that. I think that's a good policy. Good for
I think so
Robert
too.
Kraft and the Patriots, man.
Yeah, I think that is a very forward thinking policy. And as we have seen this only get more severe in a sense, I think that is the right measure to take, at least for this season, when we don't really know what's going to happen with the NFL yet. There's still a lot of time going on. So letting those season ticket holders opt out, giving the teams time to find a different season ticket holder to buy those tickets if there are fans, I think it's the right move.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a good idea by the Patriots.
Yes, and then we have a few more last things here. Brett, there was a boxing question I wanted to raise to you. Jamie Foxx was announced to play Mike Tyson in the upcoming biopic about Tyson. He has to gain like 30 to 40 pounds or something ridiculous to pick up Mike Tyson's frame, and then the camera's going to make him like another 20 pounds heavier as well. Who's going to be the better boxing actor? Will it be Will Smith as Muhammad Ali or Jamie Foxx as Mike Tyson?
Can I throw in a third answer? I'm gonna say Michael B. Jordan as Creed, Apollo Creed's son.
Well, if we're doing that, then Sylvester Stallone, Rocky.
Well, then the original Apollo Creed. um, but yeah, I mean, there's tons of. I mean, oh God, Raging Bull's a great boxing movie as well. So if you haven't seen that one, check that one out. But there's tons of good boxing movies.
I just think Mike Tyson's going to be a really hard character to play. First off, he's still alive, so you can get some information from him on how to play him that way. But everyone already knows who this person is. It's not like you're playing someone from the past. Second, he has a very iconic, unique voice that is going to be very hard to
Yeah.
mimic. That is going to be
Yes.
very hard to mimic and stay in character with. And then third, just the sheer power that Mike Tyson fought with was terrifying and also one of a kind. Like, I'm not entirely sure how Jamie Foxx is going to step up to play Mike Tyson, but I'll be interested to watch the movie whenever it comes out.
Yeah, I agree. The voice thing's gonna be interesting with the lisp and everything. That's gonna be tough.
That's going to take some practice for sure.
Yeah, but one last thing before we get out of here. Uh, some disgusting news out of NASCAR today. Really disappointing. The Geico 500 at Talladega was supposed to be today. It ended up being postponed and then later delayed or delayed rather, and then later postponed. So it'll be to Monday at 3 p.m. But that is a small potato story from what is coming out of Bubba Wallace's garage, where a noose was discovered this afternoon, and that is just disgusting and gross and really sad for the sport of NASCAR.
It is an absolutely despicable act of racism that was done. Brett, you and I actually had to come back and re record our ending to this episode because we had recorded our NASCAR, and then once we had finished, found out that this had happened. NASCAR is releasing an immediate full investigation to find out who did this. Bubba Wallace put out a rather strong statement where at the end he quoted his mother, who said, "They're just trying to scare you." He put out a very poignant statement. I encourage everyone to go read it. It's on his Twitter account, but an absolutely disgusting, despicable, horrid act. And it also brings to light that while there was weather delays that were going on today, there was a plane that flew over Talladega with a Confederate flag that said "Defund NASCAR." It's disgusting.
It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's just blatant racism, and it's gross. Like, to be honest, there's no place for this in America. And I've always personally thought of sports as like, it's never anything about color or anything like that. It's just like competing against people. And obviously, you and I are both white, so we don't deal with this as other people do. But uh, I mean, just you always think of sports as almost like a safe haven, and it's just sad that when racism crosses over, it's just gross, like you said, despicable. I think you summed it up well.
And
And just not for anything else other than I just want to support this guy. I'm definitely going to be backing him tomorrow at the sports book. Just, I mean, I can't reach out to him personally, so it's just I'm going to show some support and definitely be a big Bob Wallace fan tomorrow, or excuse me, Monday at 3 p.m.
I absolutely support that as well. This is it's just so sad to see. I mean, a noose, it is obvious racism, the historical context that a noose portrays and has in this country. There's no reason to put that in the garage of the only black driver of NASCAR, besides to make a racial statement like that. It shows how blatant this still is, how prevalent it still is, and the work that does still need to be done, and why what is going on right now is going on. It's just a prime example of what everyone has been saying out on the streets right now. But like you said, Brett, you're going to put your money on Bubba Wallace tomorrow. I may find myself doing the same thing. We have a few more bets. You mentioned them when we first recorded this. Just give those out again one more time.
Yeah, and real quickly before I do that, you mentioned NASCAR statement and the news was in the garage. Like, I'm hopeful that there are security cameras at the garage, so it'll be pretty
Absolutely.
easy investigation. Like, to I don't know if it was an employee, if someone somehow got into the garage. Like, I don't know who it is, but that person should never ever be allowed back anywhere. Like, just stay home and get the fuck out of here.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
but yeah, I did play some bets Sunday for the race. I was on Jimmy Johnson to finish in the top 10 plus 135, Kyle Busch plus 350 to finish in the top 3, Keselowski plus 250 to finish in the top 3, and Keselowski plus 750 to win. Um, kind of feels meaningless at this point, but those are some bets I was on earlier today, and then obviously they will carry over to the Monday race. So you have that as well.
Yes, and Brett, like you had also mentioned, you and I may also find ourselves on Bubba Wallace in some form. I'm not sure how I will be betting him, but I probably will as well. If I do, I'll put that out on our social media. Follow us at NBB Pod on Twitter, at Next Best Bet on Instagram and the Next Best Bet Facebook page. Also, we're finally posting some videos right now, so make sure to follow our YouTube channel as well. Subscribe to that. Next Best Bet on YouTube. We're putting out our full-length videos of our podcast as well as cutting them into clips and posting them individually by sport, as well as our Beginner Boulevard. So plenty of content that we are putting out right now that you guys can make sure to catch. And if you didn't see, Brett just nodded in approval as well. This has been episode 53 of The Next Best Bet. Sports seem like they're on their way. We'll see what we have coming up in the next episode for next weekend. For Brett, I'm Jake. We'll talk again on Thursday.